Well, actually, maybe unlike a lot of the talks that you've been going to today, I'm not going to talk a lot about Edge and the new wallet. I'll talk a little bit about it at the very end. But I want to talk about something that I think is pretty important in space, especially right now and the timing that we've got in this ecosystem. I'm going to talk about forks, hard forks, soft forks, replay protection, and help people understand what's going on. I feel like I've had this talk with multiple people over and over and over again, and it is somewhat complex, and it is important to know. It's somewhat technical, but I'm trying to target the general audience, help you understand what is going on, what were the forks that have happened with Bitcoin Cash, what are the upcoming ones, and what are the differences, and what can you do about it? So, first of all, kind of go back to, you've heard the term fork over and over again in this ecosystem. What are the different kinds of forks? So at its kind of barest, simplest, at its earliest phase, there's an ability to fork code. You could take a block of code and just simply fork it, meaning that you just start to edit it independently of the original code base. And we've done that even prior to cryptocurrencies. We do this today in all sorts of code bases on GitHub and other types of software platforms. And we've done that in the cryptocurrency space from the early days of forking Bitcoin into another currency, such as Litecoin, Zcash. So we've done that already. And that is a completely different blockchain, a completely different code base. Now, within the same blockchain, you can have what's called a soft fork, where the rules tighten. You make rules for a valid transaction stricter. And then there's a hard fork, and there's a few different types of hard forks. Generally speaking, hard forks are considered to be when rules actually become looser, meaning you can accept more things than you normally would accept before. Just described exactly a little visual of a hard fork, and once again, the hard fork expands the protocol, allows you to do or accept more types of transactions. And this is what we're going to focus on in this talk today, is primarily about hard forks, because this is what creates what we call chain splits. This is what has created the different forks that we have seen and that we're going to see in the future. And that's what will also create the need for replay protection and, of course, the description of what even a replay attack is. So the types of hard forks. A hard fork, in essence, in a way, it's a bad name, because when people think of a fork, they think of the different prongs of a fork going in different directions. Well, a hard fork doesn't actually have to split. It simply is a loosening of the rules. So if you take the rules and you loosen them, but everyone adopts them, you don't have a split. And that's what you see on the left side of the screen. You just simply change the rules, and everyone goes that path. And there's history of doing exactly this in protocols, internet protocols. So this isn't something that we haven't done before with respect to technology. With respect to a blockchain, which is definitely a new innovation, it's unique that we have a hard fork that can both split and not split, and there's money involved in it. It's not just us agreeing, but if we don't agree, we now have money that can replicate across two different chains. So within the no split and chain split examples, I think what most of us are concerned about, which has been happening, is an actual chain split. So the two are different, and there's nomenclature. We're in an ecosystem that is new. We're creating new vocabulary. A lot of us are like, what's the difference? Well, that's the main difference. Changing the rules, hard fork. People not agreeing to those rules, chain split. And so what exactly then is a replay attack? A lot of people have heard this. They're like, oh my God, you're going to lose your money. This wallet won't protect you because it's going to lose your money because it doesn't handle the replay attacks, or this protocol doesn't do this, X, Y, and Z, and so therefore things can get replayed. So the best analogy for a replay attack, and once again, this technology doesn't have good analogies in the real world, but the best analogy is if you tried to fork the banking system, and you took the entire banking system with people's bank accounts, checking account numbers, and you said, I'm just going to go and mirror it and create my own banking system. Everyone's got the same checking account numbers and the same balances. And now you go to issue a check into the old banking system. Someone literally takes it, copies it, and shoves it into the other banking system. And that check looks exactly the same. It's got the same bank account number, the signature goes in the same place, the date, the amount, it looks exactly the same, and both banking systems use the exact same check format. So now, even though you only wanted to send someone money on the old banking system, you're going to end up sending money to someone in the new banking system, which has a completely separate set of balances. They might start at the exact same time, where everybody has the balance from the old into the new. At the time of the fork, that replay attack will spend your money on both chains. Now, does it instantly happen? Does it automatically happen? No. But once you take that check and you sign it and you kind of broadcast it out to the network, you pretty much have to expect that it will. Never assume that it won't get broadcast out to the network. You will get replayed. And so this is what's considered a replay attack. So there's different ways to protect against a replay attack. We're going to go down a few of these different methods, and these aren't necessarily something that someone does. It could be something that you do with command line tools as a developer, as a wallet provider, or as a very knowledgeable user, or as the protocol. So we're going to talk about what the protocol can do. When a new fork comes about and they implement new rules, there's some things that they can do to add replay protection. So there's two types. One's called mandatory replay protection, where it just happens automatically. What you spend on one chain, one banking system, simply cannot be spent on the other. And another type is opt-in, meaning you have to do explicit operations to make sure that that check only gets cashed in one system and not the other. And there's two types of opt-in that we'll talk about. So mandatory replay protection. The best analogy to this is you just change the check format. So we're all used to, for example, in the old system, kind of conventional check where there's a signature on the bottom right and there's your amount and there's the date and the little memo field and all that. And you just change it in the new system, in the new chain. You say, you know what, if we see a check with a signature on the bottom right, it's not valid. We're not going to take it. We're only going to take checks with a signature on the bottom left. You do that, then any check you write in the old system is not valid in the new, and vice versa. It's as simple as that. It's mandatory. So no matter what you do, you're automatically kind of protected against a replay. You can use the conventional software, your conventional checkbook that you've had for 10 years, just cut and sign checks, and you know they're only going to the old system. Then we have what's called opt-in. This gets much more complex. So with opt-in replay protection, there's a couple different types. So the first one we'll talk about is one such that the new chain, the new system, introduces a new format. A new check format, one that does not work on the old system, even though the old check format works in the new. So the best analogy to this as well is, once again, that same check that you're used to writing, but now the new banking system says, you can put the signature on the bottom left or the bottom right. I'll take either one. However, the old hasn't changed. Remember, that's the old system, the rules didn't change, we only accept that on the bottom right. So this can offer a type of replay protection. I'll talk about it a little later on how that actually gets implemented. But just understand that concept of this is opt-in replay protection. We are creating a new transaction format, but it's not required to use it. And the reason why implementations would do this is because they want to stay compatible with existing software. Right? They want to say that, hey, the wallets that you were using that were putting the signature on the bottom right, they continue to work. Right? They don't have to change. Type 2 is kind of the flip side. Instead of saying we're going to create a new transaction format, we're going to say those old checks that you were writing, you can continue writing them, but we'll do something special. If you do something special to that check, it won't be valid on the new chain, on the new system. As an example, we can write a little information in the memo field. You know that memo field in your check? Most of the bank just ignores it. You write whatever you want. I hate you, bank. And they just kind of ignore it. They'll still cash your check. Well, we can create a special little message. Say we made it hodl hodl. So you write hodl hodl in the memo of your check. The old banking system just sees it and says, all right, just cash it. No problem. The new banking system has a special rule. It says it sees the hodl hodl, it's not valid. It just simply says, no, I'm not going to accept that check. So it's another type of opt-in. And really it's a type of the difference between these opt-ins are who accepts the transaction, who considers it valid, and who considers it invalid. Is it the old or is it the new? So how can opt-in replay protection actually be utilized? This gets a little bit in the weeds and a little bit technical, but hopefully you can understand. In most Bitcoin wallets, you probably are familiar with the fact that you have multiple addresses. Some only have one, but most of those have faded out over the course of the years, with the exception of Coinbase. But most of them give you multiple addresses. And as you receive money, you could be receiving into different addresses. So everything below this red line is before the fork. So you received some money into address 1 with a transaction address 2 and address 3. Well, in type 1 replay protection, and so once again, to rewind, there's a new transaction format that's invalid on the old network. What you can do is you can do one transaction. Do one transaction that takes all of your money from all of your addresses. Let's say you only had 3. Take all of your money from 3 addresses and spend it into a 4th address. That transaction is invalid on the old chain, so you just kind of sit there and wait for it to confirm. It can't get replayed. Once it gets a confirmation, you can do the other side. You can do the old chain and spend money into a different address. So it's important that those go to two different addresses. That creates a difference in history. This goes back to UTXOs and unspent transactions, which are a bit outside of the scope of this talk. But by putting money into all of your money into two different addresses, on one chain it's in one address, in another chain it's another address, you now create two different histories. And from then on, all of those funds are protected on each chain. You can't get replayed. If you were to put them into the same address, well, they look the same. So both banking systems look the same. You have money in the same accounts. That check can now be written and be broadcast on both accounts. The main thing is you're basically putting it in a different account on one system, on the old versus the new. And then the flip side is true when you're doing type 2 opt-in replay protection. As a reminder with type 2, and I'm arbitrarily choosing these types, type 1 and type 2 don't have any standard in the system. But in type 2, that type where you can say hodl hodl on the signature line, that's effectively what you do. You broadcast a transaction on the old chain, and you put that little hodl hodl on the memo line, and that way the new chain ignores it. It says, oh, it's not a valid transaction. Spend all your money into an address 4, and you sit there and you let it confirm. Once it's confirmed, you then spend all of your money on the new chain, send a transaction with the format that the new chain can understand, and broadcast it to address 5. And now your money's been split. So this is called splitting your coins and making sure that its existence is defined differently on each of the chains, effectively preventing replay. Now, the one caveat of this, however, is that while you might protect your current balance, it doesn't necessarily protect incoming funds that come to you after the fact. If the incoming funds were already split like this by someone else before they paid you, that's fine. Let's say someone didn't realize. They didn't know how to do protection of their funds, or their wallet provider didn't do that for them. Then they might be sending you 2 coins at a time. They might send 2 coins right back into address 1 again. And then that's not split. And then you'd have to go through that process as well with those coins. The end story of this is complex. It's kind of a mess. And the goal is to kind of educate, but make people realize there's not a really good, easy solution. This is definitely one of the biggest challenges that Bitcoin as a protocol, from its user experience, from its understandability, from its mass adoptability, this is, I would say, the biggest challenge that it's going to hit, is forks that are contentious, that have an actual chain split, and don't have mandatory replay protection. So how does this apply to the different hard forks we've seen today? So the Bitcoin Cash hard fork and what we are hearing Bitcoin Gold will be is mandatory. It has mandatory replay protection. So they implemented the whole, Bitcoin Cash, you've got to put the signature on the right side. Our old system's never seen that. So the old system completely ignores it. And our old system, Bitcoin, just put the signature where you always have been putting it. So there's no way to spend on both. There's no transaction that's valid on both. So that's the easiest kind. But the caveat is, now all of the ecosystem that has been built for Bitcoin, the wallets, the payment processors, the exchanges, they are all incompatible because they only know how to put the signature on the right side. And the developers of Bitcoin Cash were okay with that. They said, that's all right. We're going to go ahead and push this currency as hard as we can and get other wallets to adopt it, get exchanges to adopt it, and get them to know how to make this type of a signature. And once again, this is all an analogy, right? These aren't the exact things that happen. But they had to make that decision that they were going to be an altcoin. In contrast with the upcoming SegWit 2x hard fork, the goal was not to make an altcoin. The goal was to, in their view, upgrade Bitcoin, to change the rules to upgrade it, for it to hopefully not be contentious, for there not to be a chain split. But so far, it looks like there will be. And so since you want the entire ecosystem to be compatible, you want the currently existing wallets and payment processors and exchanges to not have to change anything. And so hence, they did not implement mandatory replay protection. They did propose opt-in replay protection. So once again, equivalent to the hodl hodl. You can write that little memo note and it would be invalid in the new chain, in the 2x chain. They proposed that there were some tough technical difficulties with it, and there were some issues that could arise, once again, outside of the scope of this discussion, so it's been pulled out. So as it stands, unless something changed in the past couple hours that I wasn't aware of, as it stands, there's no replay protection built into the protocol. So it accepts the exact same transactions as the current Bitcoin Core chain with no differences at all. So no matter what your wallet does, if you broadcast a transaction from a current address, it will get broadcast onto both chains, and you would double spend it. That's what they've implemented today. That can still change. I think the estimate of the hard fork is somewhere around the 17th to the 18th of November. It would be real cramped to get a code change implemented and tested and deployed before then, but I can't vouch for what their intent is between now and then. So what can be done in this case where there is no replay protection, like as it stands with SegWit 2x? So once again, the end goal is to get, as far as protecting your funds in such a case, the goal is to get all of your funds onto two different addresses, one that's on one chain and one that's on the other. So without that opt-in, that little rule, like the little hodl or the signature on the bottom left, without those changed rules, the best thing you can do is to actually try to spend your money onto both chains simultaneously and hope that the transaction that's meant for one chain propagates really quickly over the network, while the transaction for the other chain propagates really quickly on the other network before someone can replay it across the two. And so it's a timing guess. It's playing the odds. And you could do this, spend all your money to one address 4, transaction 4, at the same time, and do that and broadcast it onto, say, one of the chains, the legacy old chain, and do the exact same thing at the exact same time onto a different address 5, on the new chain. And then sit there and wait and hope that both transactions confirm on the different networks going to two different addresses. There's a chance that doesn't happen, and then you end up having this left side transaction confirm on both chains. And if that happens, well, you didn't lose any money, you just spent a mining fee, but you own all the money because that's all of your addresses. Repeat and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, until you finally see that there's actually two different transactions. So this is somewhat complex, but it's doable. It's a way to protect yourself, but definitely it's not fun. There is a last and somewhat complicated way that requires third-party support with funds coming out from miners. I don't have any space and slides for this, but mixing of funds with a miner that has only mined blocks on one chain versus another can protect funds as well. It's something that would require special support of mixing inputs between your wallet and a different wallet that's owned by miners or another provider. So I'm not covering that on here, but it is one way to actually get good guaranteed replay protection. So a little tip, something you can do before almost any fork. So before the Bitcoin Cash fork, we published a blog post on what people can do to make their life easier post-fork. So one thing is, if you remember that slide I had mentioned about having money in multiple addresses, in order to use the funds or to split your funds afterwards, you need to spend from all those addresses into one address. Well, it's a lot easier to do that when everything's in one key, in one address. So sending everything to one address first before the fork is generally will make your life easier after the fact. When I talked about making a transaction on one chain versus another, you might need external software that you've never used before. You might need a wallet that's specially tailored to that new chain. You might have never used it before, and it might not accept the weird public-private seeds that your wallet uses because they're not standard across wallets. The one thing that is standard across wallets is individual raw private keys. That's fairly standard. So if you get all your funds into one address, you've got one private key that you can use in various wallets to effectively do these weird spending of funds on one chain versus another. So this is one little tip that we do recommend doing before a chain split. And then after the fork, try not to move your funds. Wait until wallet providers mention what really has happened, has the fork really occurred, and what type of protection is available, what they might deploy. So I think in the Ethereum fork from Ethereum to Ethereum Classic, some wallet providers were going to release an update, given new information as far as what that would split coins for you, but they couldn't test it until the fork happened. So you may want to just kind of relax, hang on to your funds, and wait until you have some word from the industry. So quick recap, the types of forks. So code fork, the code forks. You just change code, that's it, nothing else. A soft fork, in the blockchain space specifically, this is where rules get tighter. You know, things that were valid before are no longer tight, are no longer valid. And a hard fork, which is what we're experiencing, is when rules get loosened and you can now accept more things than before. The types of hard forks, obviously the ones where people agree, there's no split. And when we don't agree, there's a chain split. And then replay attacks. This is when you take that check on one banking system and then just copy it onto another, and then you're spending funds on both chains. Replay protection, we talked about the mandatory. There's nothing for you to do. The check is only valid on one chain versus another. And then the opt-in, that's where it gets more complex. You know, basically, a subset of these transactions are valid on one chain versus another. Cool. A little shameless shilling and plug. So what do we do? Thanks, Mark, for the introduction. We were Airbits. So for a lot of people, that was a mobile Bitcoin wallet on iOS and Android, able to transact and secure keys client side. We do believe strongly in people owning and controlling their own funds, but giving them the user experience that they're accustomed to with mobile banking. And we've had that deployed for 3 years. Our company's been around for 4. You know, it's got full user control, zero knowledge, security of the keys, auto encryption and backup. We don't want people to have to deal with backing up their keys. In-app buy and sell. And the big thing that we announced and launched today is our shift, both in brand and in product. We've rebranded to be Edge, and our new product, Edge Wallet, is going to take just about all the functionality of our old wallet and now go multi-currency with a new stack that supports our partner applications too. So if you're developing a decentralized application, Ethereum, smart contract app, we can use the same key management, the way we encrypt and back up and synchronize keys, easy for the user. We can embed not just in our own app, but also in apps that are used on other blockchains. That's it. Happy to take any questions. I think I've got about 5+ minutes or so. Hopefully that was informational to you guys. Hopefully it didn't go too far over everyone's head. And hopefully I didn't scare everyone too much. I know this is a challenging and kind of scary topic. Hopefully this is mostly information and enlightening.
If the fork happens and there's a vast difference in mining power, that would suggest that fees and amount of transactions backed up on one chain will be a lot bigger than on the other chain. In which case, wouldn't it make sense that if you have a lot of addresses that you did not put into one, spending that on with a very low fee will not get approved on one chain, but will get approved on the other chain, because one chain will think a fee is too low and just reject all the inputs.
So when you talk about the price is generally referenced to dollars. However, there's a chance that even though one chain has a very different price than the other, the fee in the actual unit of the cryptocurrency isn't very different. So there's a chance that that could happen as well.
The required mining fee might be a lot higher because as more people are trying to compete to get into a block, because blocks are a little slower to confirm.
So you're referring to keeping your funds in all these addresses because you can have a drastic difference in fees between the two? Yeah. It's an interesting idea. I don't know the metrics by which that would create enough of a difference versus just the actual difference in the required fee on the blockchains themselves. Like how much of an effect do you have by having a lot more inputs versus just the actual fee difference on those chains? I'm not entirely sure, but it's a possibility. I would think for convenience, though, for how hard it is to deal with potentially hundreds. I know people have thousands of addresses. Having to deal with those potentially one by one could be a challenge.
I think one of the ideas for one of the wallets was instead of at the same time you do one transaction with a really low fee, and then as soon as one of the chains confirms that you do the same transaction with a higher fee.
That's if the low fee doesn't, also you hope that it doesn't confirm on the other chain as well. So it's still a timing game, it's still a guessing game. The gist of it, there's things you can do. Ross seems like he's very knowledgeable about the different tricks you could do in the case of no replay protection where you don't have any guarantees. So you have no guarantees, it's all a guessing game, but there's things you can do to make it more likely, right?
This is actually a question on your Edge wallets. Do you guys have, I know you guys are zero knowledge, so you don't actually do anything centrally, but do you have anything in terms of APIs to have maybe notifications from your wallets if you want to send out a webhook or something like that?
Yeah, so we don't do any push notifications because that requires us kind of knowing the different devices and device IDs. But we have pull notifications, meaning we could set a notification that will go to all of the users on the system, all the account holders, and it just gets pulled every so often. And so when you launch the app, it sees that there's a notification, it shows it. So we do that for like upgrades. Okay, there's a new upgrade available, it just pulls and says, oh, show this display to the user. If there's an urgent upgrade or if there's some network status, we can do a pull. So we still feel like it fits under the zero-knowledge architecture because we're not pushing to certain accounts. We're just simply putting a message up there, and the phones are grabbing them.
Hi, over here. You may have covered this, and it may just have been above my head, but with the upcoming SegWit 2X hard fork, could you talk about the worst case scenario for someone who owns Bitcoin right now in a wallet service that's not doing things the way you think they should be done, perhaps?
In all honesty, in the SegWit 2X hard fork, if they continue with no replay protection, it'd be hard for wallets to do much. It would be going above and beyond to be able to protect a user. So pretty much any wallet you use, in the worst case scenario where there's no replay protection, the worst thing you can do is right after the fork, go send money to someone else. Send money to yourself, that's not so bad because the worst case, you just get replayed and you have both of your funds. But as soon as you send it to someone else, that's the worst thing you can do. Or send it to an exchange, that's the worst thing you can do. You might give up both. You might give up both, exactly. So, sure.
Just 1 second.
So the question was for me to repeat that. So the worst thing you can do immediately after a hard fork where there is no replay protection at all is to send money to somebody else or to an exchange, to keys that you don't own. And so as simple as that, because that can get replayed, especially if it's someone you don't trust. So going to local Bitcoins and doing a trade and sending him a transaction, her a transaction, that could be a problem. So that's where I say.
Because I think that's what he meant. Because you could end up accidentally sending both coins instead of the single coin that you intended to send.
Correct. You'll be sending both coins. Almost certainly you'll be sending both coins because I know personally people that will run servers that are literally going to copy transactions on both networks. Like I know it will happen. So yeah, you will send both coins. If you send to yourself, then it doesn't matter. You're just going to send both coins to yourself. Correct.
So, quick follow-up. Can you, in that case, can you tell us what you think is the long-term outcome of the SegWit 2X hard fork? Are we going to have 2 coins or 2 chains indefinitely?
It's looking like it, but I don't know that that's the long-term outcome. There's still what people think is hope for opt-in replay protection at minimum. I feel like there's almost no hope for mandatory because that's not the ethos of the project. The project is meant to upgrade. So at minimum, putting in opt-in. And once again, one was proposed and accepted, and they just found some challenges with it. So it's possible they're evaluating other opt-in options. And if there is an option for opt-in replay protection, and there's time for it before the fork, then wallet providers can implement a feature such that you click like a button, and it spends your money onto one chain in such a way that it's incompatible with the other. So it'd be something that you'd have to do manually, but it could be provided to you in the user interface. So that's something a wallet provider can do if the protocol gives us that option. But right now, there's no option for that.
Will Airbits or Edge have any support to help users with that? And also, any idea when Edge will be publicly available?
So support for opt-in replay protection, if it came in tomorrow, we feel confident that we'd be able to put that into both Edge and Airbits to help people out. Anything after that, it's all gray area after that because the closer and closer they get to the hard fork time, the harder and harder it is for us to get it in time. Plus, there's also the delay in getting updates to the app, to the app stores. And we'd have to say, if we found out the day before the hard fork that there was going to be opt-in replay protection, the best we could do is say, users were working on it, don't spend your money. We can't update the app immediately. We've got to do some engineering. And if you just don't get the message through all the channels that we broadcast it, blog, Twitter, Facebook, whatnot, and you do spend, what can we do at that point? Main thing is we have a decentralized wallet. It accesses the Bitcoin network directly. We can't actually stop users from spending, and that's part of our ethos. If we were one of the types of wallets that only work through our ecosystem, it only worked through our servers, we could block people from spending. But that incurs a whole other ball of can of worms that we don't want to have. So that's the best thing that we could do, once again, if we get opt-in replay protection options like tomorrow.
So Edge is it's going to be a separate wallet from Airbits, or just going to be an upgrade?
It's going to be a complete separate wallet. So to answer your second question, when do we expect it to be available? We hope iOS would be in people's hands as beta this week or early next week. Android soon to follow after that, and we're not making any announcements on production. We'll see how the beta goes when we get it in a lot of people's hands, and we've got glitches to fix and whatnot. But you're mentioning, is it going to be an upgrade? It's going to be a completely separate application. Airbits will exist separately. It'll be just Bitcoin. Edge will be an overlapping but different set of features. Yep.
How long do you recommend that we wait after the fork to start using it again?
If you can wait until your provider gives you notice of what to do. And so depending on what service you're using, and also depending on what they hear, so long as you can hold on to your coins and not have to use them, then I'd wait as long as you can until you hear from your provider what to do with them. So I don't know how long that will be, because different outcomes could happen. As well, if you really don't want to wait, you can try some of these mechanisms yourself. And that requires a little bit of technical understanding and ability to use wallets simultaneously on different networks. And that's not what I'm covering, is how to do that. I'm just covering, what is the mechanism by which the network operates.
Paul, can you talk to, so you're going to support multiple coins, I guess, through some API. So people that operate other blockchains or whatever, what's the process if they want to add support for their coin to your wallet?
Got it. So if you're in development of another blockchain, we have a very modular plugin architecture where you could write a lightweight JavaScript plugin. As long as it knows how to talk to your network and knows how to create transactions, detect funds on your network, give transaction details, all of that kind of basic high-level send-receive functionality, they can get plugged into Airbits and then supported as another blockchain that it can effectively talk to, another currency. And if that blockchain also has token support, part of that plugin API is to say, okay, here's the tokens that I support and how to send and receive them. So it's very modular, works really well for plugging in new currencies. Cool. I think I'm about out of time. Thanks a lot, everybody. Hopefully that answered some questions, but probably created a ton more. But at least you hopefully leaving with more info than when you came in. So thanks a lot, everybody.